Hey everybody, Carl Schoof, back with the TimelineLite Ultimate Starter Guide on ActiveTouch Plus. Today we're going to be taking a close look at TimelineMax and all the special features that it gives us. Most importantly, it allows us to create timelines that repeat. And we're going to be talking about all the different properties such as total progress, total time, total duration that TimelineMax gives us. We're also going to be using add callback to do cool stuff like swap the depths of display objects while timelines are playing. I'm also going to show you a number of ways so that you can actually tween a timeline. You may be asking, well, what does that mean? Well, in my bubbles demo here, when I hit pause, you'll see that we slowly ease the timeline out. And when I hit play, it slowly eases in. And I'm going to show you a number of tricks that you can use with TimelineLite and TimelineMax along the way. There's a lot of cool stuff we'll be talking about that you can add to your arsenal of green sock goodness. So buckle up, we got a lot to cover today. Alright folks, the first thing I really want to get into today is the major difference between TimelineLite and TimelineMax. And that is the fact that TimelineMax can accept a special property called repeat. And we can specify how many times the timeline will play. Unlike TimelineLite, where we would have to put an onComplete callback in place, which would run a function that would force our timeline to play another time, we can very simply tell a TimelineMax to repeat a certain amount of times and also have a repeat delay, so that we have a little bit of a gap in time between those repeats happening. Now I have a file already built that's ready to output all of the different new properties that we're going to have access to. Once we tell a timeline that it can repeat, we then can also access the total duration, the total progress, and the total time. And all of these properties have values that are in relationship to the timeline playing in all of its iterations with all of its cumulative delays. We've been using current progress and current time in our TimelineLites, and they're in relationship to one iteration of the timeline playing. If my timeline is going to play twice, well, the total time is going to be more than the current time. And we'll see that in just a second. Right now, we only have one iteration of the timeline playing through. So I'm going to add a repeat to my timeline, and we'll see the different relationships of these new properties to the ones that we're already familiar with. So right now the duration of my timeline is 2 seconds long, and it's only playing once, so the total duration is 2 seconds as well. I'm going to go into my code, and in the constructor I'm just going to add a repeat property, and I'm going to say let's repeat once. And I'm going to save this and test. And now we're going to get some different numbers here. Okay? The total duration is now 4 seconds because it takes 2 seconds to play once. It's going to take 4 seconds when it repeats. And we now have a total progress slider that's working and our total time. So once this animation plays all the way through, you'll see that total time ends at 4 seconds and current time ends at 2 seconds. Okay? Remember, the timeline playing through once is only 2 seconds, but the timeline playing through twice is going to be 4 seconds. Now, if I take the total progress slider and rewind it back to 0, you'll see that current progress, current time, total time, it's all 0. We're at the very, very, very beginning. But as I move forward with total progress, when I get to the halfway point here, let me just scrub up to 0.50, you'll see that we're halfway through the total progress. The guy moved by once, but the current progress is 1, and the current time is 2, and total time are 2. So for that first segment, or the first iteration of the timeline, current time and total time are totally in sync. When I get beyond the halfway point, notice what happens. Current progress goes back to 0, and current time goes back to 0 also. And then as I scrub forward, you'll see that total time is progressing all the way up to 4. So it may take a few times of you hitting the reset button and dragging these sliders slowly, but it will make sense to you how total progress tracks the total amount of time that has transpired for all the iterations to take place. Okay? And we're also going to show you how to add a repeat delay. So I'm going to say repeat delay, and I'm just going to say, you know what, I want to wait 4 seconds between the timeline playing through once and then playing again. So we'll save this, and we'll have some different numbers to look at. Most importantly, the total duration here is 8 because it plays through once for 2 seconds, it waits 4 seconds, brings us to 6, and then it plays again for another 2 seconds, bringing us to 8. Now you'll see that the total time is 8 seconds, and the current time is still 2 seconds. The current time can never get higher than the duration of one iteration. And when we restart, I just want to point out that while the delay is happening, the total time is still increasing. The total time never stops, and then we get to the end. So again, while that delay happens, total time moves, current progress and current time stay locked. All right, the next advantage that TimelineMax gives us, and that in conjunction with giving us the ability to repeat, we also have an on-repeat callback. And that just means that we can fire a function whenever this timeline repeats. So that's going to be after the timeline plays once, and then after the delay transpires, the on-repeat will fire. So I'm just going to put in the word repeat here, which refers to a function that I have way down here. My repeat function just simply traces out the timeline has repeated. So this can come in handy for a number of reasons. Let's watch it. So we play 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll see the timeline has repeated. So if I had multiple repeats, that would fire multiple times. Now we could use this repeat callback to keep track of how many times the timeline is played and display that value to a user. In fact, if you want a homework assignment, why don't you try to create a counter variable, increment it on repeat, and display it to the user. It might be a fun little challenge. The last fun little property I want to show you is yo-yo, and it works exactly like it would in a TimelineMax. And in my TimelineMax constructor, I'm just going to add yo-yo true, and the repeat delay, I'm just going to cut that down. And so now when the timeline repeats, it's going to play backwards. And so it's going to play forwards, and then it's going to roll backwards. And even though the animation is going backwards, it's important to note that the total progress and total time always increase, okay? But the current progress is in fact rewinding, okay? Pretty cool. Now, I've only been focusing on these constructor properties, and I haven't really talked about the implementation of how my sliders work or how those values are displayed. And again, the reason for that is because we've done sliders before. The only difference here is that I'm doing 2 of them, and you can look through the code and see how it works. But I do want to point out that when I'm populating my text fields, I am converting my total progress and current progress to strings, so they'll go in the text fields. But I'm also using the number method of toFixed. And if that's new to you, I just want to explain that toFixed will let you dictate how many digits to the right of the decimal point you want to display. So instead of rounding or dividing by 1,000 or something like that, you can just say, just show me 2 digits to the right of the decimal point, and it comes in real handy. So a little extra bonus for you folks. This next little demo is going to be really fun. I'm going to show you how to use TimelineMax's add callback method to call functions outside of TimelineMax from TimelineMax. And we're going to use it to do things like swap depths. Right now you'll see that this little blob, his animation has him come out. He stops in front of this bush. If you lived in medieval times, you might call it a shrubbery. And what he does is he jumps up in the air. You'll notice that he's in front of the bush right now, right? And then when he gets to the top, add callback is going to swap the bush and the blob, so when he comes down, he's going to be behind it. And when I rewind backwards, he's going to jump up in the air again. They're going to swap depths, and now he's going to be in front of it. So add callback is very useful when you need to do things while a timeline is running that TimelineMax can't handle. TimelineMax has nothing to do with swapping depths of display objects. So I want to take a look at the code that we have right now, and the starter file that I'm using here is just very basic. We have our timeline set up, and the blob comes in from an x of -100, and he's going to end up right in front of that bush. The next thing that's going to happen is he's going to do a little jump, so his y value is going to change by a relative -110 pixels, which will jump him up in the air. And when that tween's done, we append a tween where he falls down. So right after he jumps up is where I want the action to start. Right now, this file looks like this. He comes in, he jumps up and down, and that's not that much fun. The timeline isn't repeating or doing anything fancy, so it's just as simple as can be to make add callback very clear. So he comes in, jumps up. That's when I want to swap the depths, but right now there's no depth swapping. So what you might do is you might say, oh, well, why don't I just use onComplete here? And I want to show you one of the downsides of using onComplete in certain situations. I'm going to say onComplete jump complete. And I have a method down here just waiting to be fired called jump complete. And we're just going to trace out for now the fact that the jump has occurred. So I'll save and let's give it a whirl. And keep your eyes on the output panel, which I have off screen. Let us just restart and you'll see that he jumps up and it says jump fired. We'll clear it out and you'll see now that if I scrub forwards, boom, jump fired happens. So I know that's working. But what you may not have noticed when I did my super quick slider move is that when I scrub backwards, jump fired doesn't happen. That onComplete of that tween only happens when the tween completes when it's playing forward. Okay, it fires once, perfect. When I scrub back, the onComplete gets totally overlooked. And really, this is the expected behavior of onComplete, and that may be your intention of using it in some points in time. So, onComplete doesn't really work for me right now. What I'm going to do is use add callback. And add callback is a method of TimelineMax that simply wants to know what function you're going to call. And I want to call jump complete. And the time or label is going to be the timeline's current duration. Okay? So that means immediately after this tween has expired, add callback will run. And it's going to be slammed right between these two tweens. So I'm going to test that out. And now you'll see that he comes in, he jumps up, jump fired. When I scrub backwards, notice, boom, jump fired again. If I go forward, jump fired again. And if I go backwards, just to show you that it works. And I can jam this thing back and forth like crazy, and I'm always going to get those jumps firing. Now that I know that at this specific point in time, I can call a function from TimelineMax, I'm going to show you that I grabbed a little swap depths function from my friends at Karupa, and basically it needs to know the parent that your objects are in, and then takes in two display objects. So right now, if I want to use that method, I'm just going to say swap depths. This is the parent. Okay, that's the current root timeline of my document class. And we're going to say, we're going to use blob MC and bush MC. And this function works great. So check it out. He comes across, he jumps up, they swap depths, and now he's behind the bush. I scrub backwards, you don't even see it. I know that jump fired happens, and now he comes down in front of the bush. And I can go back and forth all day long like this, and he's just going to be jumping back and forth. So again, add callback for triggering events that TimelineMax can't handle on its own. And it's awesome. So now what I could do is go into my timeline, and we're just going to say, hey, you know what, you're going to repeat once, and we'll set yo-yo to true, and then I can just sit back and watch this play. He jumps up and down, and there he goes. Now if I'm playing forward, suppose I have him right here and I hit restart. Everything is going to work just fine, but I want to show you how we can get rid of a little bug that I just sort of introduced. If I scrub all the way forward and he's behind the bush, if I hit restart, he started behind the bush. If he's behind the bush and I hit restart, well, the blob is never going to be brought to the front. So on my reset method down here, before I restart, I'm just going to say add child blob MC, and then he will always start at the highest depth. So I'll save, we'll test, and there's my little yo-yo action. Everything worked great. I'm going to scrub all the way to the back, so remember he's behind the bush now, and if I restart, he's going to be in front of the bush. So I just love the way this works. It's hard to grab these sliders when it's running, but I can jump back and forth all I want, and TimelineMax is literally bulletproof. It works seamlessly, flawlessly. Now I'm going to give you guys a handy tip for taking a very complex animation, and instead of just pausing it abruptly, we're going to ease it to a nice slow stop. And right here, this file that I'm showing you is a timeline that contains many nested timelines. Now, if you watched the previous video on advanced sequencing, you'll be very familiar with the basic theory of how this timeline was made. We create a bunch of sub-timelines and we insert or embed them into a master timeline. And that allows us to pause the master timeline and reverse the master timeline. So all these little bubble animations can be rewound all the way back to the beginning. They can be paused at any time and they can be reversed. What I want to do though is get rid of this abrupt sort of smack in the face with a frying pan abrupt stop. So we're going to have all the bubbles just sort of slow down nicely. And if you could see me, my hand makes a really nice smooth slow down gesture. So what we're going to do is go into our code. I'm going to give you a brief overview of how this file is constructed and give you some ideas for how you can build similar animations. And the main key here is that I call a method called createTimeline, okay? And I have my TL, which is going to be my main timeline like I've been using in every demo so far. It's a TimelineLite. This isn't TimelineMax specific. And we're going to scroll down and you'll see I create a new timeline, and then there's just this little for loop right here that says TL insert get bubble animation, and then the insertion point is count times 0.1. Well, I'm inserting 300 bubbles, or at least I should say that I'm inserting 300 bubble timeline animations, and each one is going to be offset by 1/10 of a second. Now 300 is a bit ridiculous, but that's the way I roll sometimes. So what does get bubble animation do? How are we inserting a function into a timeline? Well, this is a little bit new to you guys. What we're doing is we're calling a function that returns a TimelineLite. So right down here I have get bubble animation, and you'll see that the return type is in fact a TimelineLite. So this function here does a little bit more than maybe one function should do, but that's okay. It creates a bubble. That's a symbol that I drew. It's in my library. It looks beautiful. I'm placing that bubble on the stage, and I'm creating something called nested TL, because this timeline is the one that's going to be inserted into my main TL up here. And I'm not going to go through all this right here, but suffice it to say there's a bunch of random stuff that happens that determines the size and the speed of the bubble and the amount and direction that it starts wiggling in. So I possibly can't go through all of this line by line here, but just trust me that every bubble has its own unique animation created, and that animation is returned into the insert method of the master timeline. So it's really pretty cool, and you can use this as a basic template for maybe making snow or flying cows or anything you want to do. And so that TL is being controlled by very simple methods for play TL, that's play timeline. And right now what's happening is that play button takes into account if the timeline is played all the way through and the current progress is 1, it's just going to do a restart. And if that isn't true, it's just going to continue playing. The pause method is just going to pause, and then we have reverse. This all goes back to the second video here. Now, what I want to do is make it so that when this entire timeline is playing, if I hit pause, it slows down. Well, something you may or may not know is that you can tween the time scale of a timeline. So check this out. Instead of pausing the actual timeline, we're going to progressively set its time scale property, which refers to the rate at which it plays back, down to 0. So I'm just going to create a very simple tween. I'm going to say TweenLite 2, and the object I'm tweening is the timeline. I'm going to take 2 seconds, and the property I'm going to change is the time scale. Okay, we're not always tweening X, Y, and alpha properties of movie clips. You can tween any numeric property on any object. So I'm going to say, let's time scale down to 0. And by just doing that, I'm going to save. And then now, this totally nutso complex animation that we have here of literally hundreds of things tweening in their own little style. When I hit pause, watch this. Did you see that? You see how nice and smooth it slowed down? And what we did is we just tweened the time scale. Now I just hit play, and play is actually telling the timeline to play again, but play isn't going to do much if the time scale is set to 0. So I'm just going to take that line of code here. I'm going to leave the logic in place for restarting or playing. And I just want to make sure that regardless of whether or not I restart or play, I'm always going to take the time scale of that timeline and I'm going to tween it back to 1. So now when I play, it's going to slowly ease nice. I'm going to hit pause, I'm going to hit play, and you'll see our bubbles come up, and then if I hit pause, they slow down. Then if I hit play, there they go. So they're not just happening suddenly. It's not as noticeable as the pause. I might even say, you know what, let's do an ease of quad.ease in, and that might make it a little bit more noticeable. So I'm going to play, hit pause. You just love the way they stop so subtly, and hit play. Then there you really see they accelerate. They don't just abruptly maintain their speed. Now when I hit reverse, they're just going to go backwards the same way. And when I hit pause, they're still going to slow down nicely. Now the only problem here is that when I hit reverse, I might also want them to continue playing in reverse if we've already paused. So right now the reverse button appears to be busted. And all I'm going to do there is take that same tween that I used to play, and once I reverse, I also need to say, hey, you know what? Let's kick that time scale back up to 1. So I'm tweening the time scale property of a very complex timeline. And this just gives you that extra element of control. Pause. It's so beautiful. And now when I reverse, it's refreshing. Next thing I want to do really quick is show you some alternate ways of tweening a timeline. And right now a very simple timeline that just takes a bunch of boxes and they scale in and fade in. And you'll notice that they're all doing this at the same rate. Okay, it's a very nice, smooth, subtle animation. Now suppose I want to add some easing to the playback of this effect. Well, what does that mean? Well, I'm going to show you. We've talked about tween 2 before, so I'm going to say TL.tween2, and it wants to know a time or label to tween to. I'm going to tween to the TL's duration. Okay, so if the duration is 5 seconds, that means I'm tweening to the 5-second point. And I'm going to also add the vars object, which we haven't done yet, and I'm going to put an ease in here. I'm going to say ease is going to do bounce.ease out. And this will be very obvious what's happening. So you see that? You get this nice little bounce at the end. And in order to program something like this, I don't even know how you would do it any other way. It's just really nice, fun effect. And what's great about tween 2 is that it respects the natural playback speed of the timeline. It's going to be the same duration as if that ease wasn't there. And to show you another fun ease for something like this, I can do a circ.ease in out. And this is going to start real slow, speed up, and then go slow on the way out. So when you do a tween 2, it does respect, again, the natural timing of the timeline. Now, suppose we wanted to make a fun little fast forward button that had maybe a little bit of an ease on it. Well, we showed you how to tween the time scale in order to do that smooth pause in the bubbles demo. Well, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this timeline and have it play naturally, but I have a button click handler set up here that I'm going to now show you how we can tween the current progress of a timeline. We've tweened the time scale. Now I'm going to say TimelineLite 2 TL And here I can put in a custom amount of time. If I want to go fast, I might just say 1 second, and I'm going to tween the current progress to a value of 1. Okay. Let me get rid of this dot, comma, save and test. And now it's playing naturally. Hit ease, and it speeds it up. So there we go. Boom. And we get that nice little fast forward. And I can also put a special ease on this as well. I'll say bounce.ease out. And it just gives you ways of animating that would be virtually impossible to program any other way. So every time it plays, I can hit the ease button anytime I want for that nice smooth tween. Alright folks, I know I've filled your brains now with TimelineLite and TimelineMax info, and it's been such a pleasure to share this series with you on ActiveTuts Plus. I urge you to write some comments on this post. If you want to email me, no problem. Just send an email to carl@snorkel.tv. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see the damage you're doing with TimelineMax now that you have this ultimate power and knowledge base. So keep up the great works, guys, and I look forward to talking to you.